All right, let's start with the war in Ukraine tonight and cover this because we got a couple of pieces of news to cover. First, the EU out with this report stating that they may send military missions to Ukraine under future guarantees, according to this report that came out just a few hours ago. EU countries do not exclude sending military missions to Ukraine with the consent of member states within the framework of future security commitments.
Okay.
So that means the EU leaders will also pledge to expand the bloc's initiative to train Ukrainian troops, as well as the possibility of sending EU military missions to Ukraine, if conditions deemed suitable and agreed by all members, according to the British newspaper.
And this is where you see this mission creep happening in the United States when legislators are starting to put legislation in place that says that the United States has to help Ukraine. It's been sort of a push and pull. The United States really wants to lead the pact and Europe to just do whatever they say. Like, we're supporting Ukraine. We're sending these troops. Europe has always been a little, we're not going to do what you say. Okay, we're going to do it. Yes, we are, and it's here and there. It's hither and thither, European sentiment on it. And so now European leaders are saying, well, it would be peaceful. That usually doesn't work out the way it seems. When the United Nations sends peacekeepers, it usually goes about the same way it does. That's the same name of the troops in the Hunger Games, is they're not there for peace at all. They're there for militant conformity.
Yeah. So earlier, Moscow, of course, cautioned against Western nations sending NATO troops to Ukraine, saying that it could lead to dangerous consequences. So this is basically them sending NATO troops to Ukraine.
Right.
Like under these auspices. So there you go. That's one big piece of the story today.
Another piece is that Ukrainian President Zelensky, he's not doing much for peace. But you may consider this a peaceful movement if you consider peace by the kind that you get from getting high. This is Zelensky on Wednesday addressing Parliament. I don't have an English translation, but what he's saying is that he wants to fast track marijuana legalization in Ukraine so that Ukrainians can cope with the trauma of war. I don't have a translation video, but I have this quote here. What he says is, we must finally fairly legalize cannabis-based medicines for all those who need them with appropriate scientific research and controlled Ukrainian production. That's interesting because marijuana doesn't grow there. So I'm not sure. I mean, maybe in like a pot on your windowsill, but it's not a major growth area. He says all the world's best practices, all the most effective policies, all the solutions, no matter how difficult or unusual they may seem to us, must be applied to Ukraine so that Ukrainians, all our citizens, do not have to endure the pain, stress, and trauma of war. I mean, I know what you can do to make it so that they don't have to endure the pain, stress, and trauma of war is stop the war, and indeed attend peace talks. But he has passed a law that makes it a crime to attend peace talks at all. So barring that, he sort of wants to anesthetize his population. Like, what I'm doing is wrong. Here's some drugs. Smoke this up and you'll care less. How do you feel about that, boys?
I mean, it's really troubling to think, well, we need to, of course, drugs and alcohol, of course, have been used by governments for decades to anesthetize the population. I mean, Japan recently, after the pandemic, was like, hey, you're not drinking enough. You should start drinking some more Japanese whiskey. Literally, the Japanese government pushing this. And so this idea of sort of keeping your population anesthetized is really, really troubling. I mean, it's like, it's so traumatic that we need to have people hopped up on something to keep them sedated.
Yeah.
Not even sedated. Just look at the whole pharmaceutical industry. I mean, that's like one big, like, that's what they want further. If we can't get you with this drug, we're going to get you with this one. If we can't get you with this one, we'll get you with this one. That's like, they just want you to be on some kind of drug, whatever it is, period.
You got to think you're right about that. You would think that like Pfizer or the biopharmaceutical complex would call up Zelensky like, hey, we saw your press conference where you want pot. We've got a lot of other stuff. Okay.
Right.
Let's make a deal.
For you.
Let's make a deal. We've got a lot of other things we could be sending. Have you noticed how America has an opioid epidemic? Have you ever seen oxycodone? We can bring that in boatloads to your country like we did in the United States.
What? What do you call it? where they're not going to get in trouble.
Oh yeah, they'll get amnesty.
No liability.
No
liability.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, and if you look at the quote that he said, we want to, legalize cannabis-based medicines with appropriate scientific research and controlled Ukrainian production. You're in a war. You have time to research marijuana and what? We didn't think that are your priorities here. Let's just go to the map again to take a look at where the map stands today. The red area, again, is in Russian control. The dark gray area is the area that has been voted into Russian control and asked Russia to intervene so they would stop being attacked by Ukraine, which has been happening since 2014. The blue dots is where Ukraine has mounted their counteroffensives, and they're less and less every time I show this map. And Russia has easily put those counteroffensives down. The blue circle is where Zelensky is working on weed. He's nowhere near the battlefield talking to Parliament about getting high. Now, in a recent article from Der Spiegel, Ukrainian soldiers were interviewed, and they said that part of their training on German tanks, after they were sort of showed buttons that they didn't understand in German, they were taken to this nightclub. And this quote has stayed with me for the last few days because I find it really haunting. It says, on the evening after their training, they went to a club not far from Munster. He says it was the first time he had been out in almost a year and a half. And the guy said, I stayed all night. It wouldn't have been worth it for just a couple hours. He says loud music, techno and trance, perfect for forgetting. Well, these boys here that were shown in this article, they're 22. They don't want to fight. They want to go home and live. They're scared and untrained, and they would be better off if the war was ended today.
Yeah. In fact, there's a Forbes piece in Forbes, by the way, is not exactly a, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's like Redacted. I wouldn't say it's like, I don't know. What's another good example? I mean, it's a mainstream media publication. I mean, it's like Forbes, it's like Bloomberg, right? Forbes magazine. It's like picking up a copy of Bloomberg, right? Your mainstream media. They have a big report about all of these Ukrainian missing brigades. Can't find them. They're missing in action, these mechanized brigades. They can't find them. Where is the Ukrainian Army's 117th Mechanized Brigade? These they're disappeared.
Disappeared, or you see sometimes on social media that they surrender. They just straight out surrender to Russian troops because Russian troops have allowed it. They don't harm them if they surrender. And a lot of times, even in this Der Spiegel piece, this person says, it's better to, what is the quote here? He says, it's better than to refuse to go into battle than to chicken out in the middle of the fight. This is what this young boy says. So what they're doing is either saying, I'm not going to go, or they try and make it into Russian territory and just surrender so that they can live. There was a viral video just last week of a Ukrainian soldier running to Russian lines, and the Russian soldier who rescued him said, congratulations, the war's over for you now. Sit here. And he gave him a bottle of water and a cigarette because they're not trained for this. They don't want to be here. They're being dragged into war. Now, the Ukrainian government has passed a law that means that even your apartment complex has to be complicit in searching for all military-aged men and dragging them to report for military service, no matter what. But more people... Go ahead.
I was going to say, if you have a legitimate reason to get passionate about what you're fighting for, that's different. You would have people volunteering at the front line, like, we're going to do this because we have to. This is our lives depend on it, or something depends on it. If I were over there, I could not for the life of me figure out, like, what am I doing this for? Like, my life is not on the line. These people's lives aren't on the line. Russia's not like coming in and just mass hurting civilians and all this other stuff. Like, why are we here? What are we doing this for? Like, that would be my question. And these guys don't have an answer to that. And they're getting dragged out because they're not getting an answer and they don't want to fight. So it's like, I don't blame them.
Well, they're fighting for land that has been asking for Russia to help them for almost a decade, and that voted to become Russia and wants to stay a part of Russia. And they're fighting to get it back for Ukraine where they don't want to be. Now, what Russia feels like is they have to hold this line because these people have been asking them for over a decade to intervene. In fact, I came across this headline this week from 2016. Take a look at this from The Guardian. In 2015, the International Monetary Fund said they didn't want to lend any more money to Ukraine unless it stopped raging its war in the Donbass. They ended up lending anyway. And then a year later, here is Christine Lagarde again from the IMF saying, we really can't stop lending, can't keep lending money to Ukraine. They're not good for it. They're too corrupt, and they keep waging this war on the Donbass. So they're taking our money, throwing it into a war, and keep running up the debt. Now, at the time, even Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko admitted that the war was costing Ukraine $8 million per day. This is, look at this headline, you guys, 2015, that Ukraine's war in the Donbass is costing $8 million per day and blowing through their IMF loans. The West knew this. The media knew this. We all are pretending that we didn't know that these people have been being slaughtered for 10 years and asked Russia to intervene. It's no wonder they did. Take a look at this Time magazine article, again from 2014, saying these Ukrainians are waiting for Russia to come and invade so that they can rejoin Russia and have their safety, is how they felt about it. So why should a young Ukrainian die to win back territory that does not want to be a part of Ukraine, never did, voted in 2014 to not be a part of Ukraine, which is why they've been terrorized ever since. Why throw human lives at this? And for Russia, it's a this or that. Like, if they give up that line, the people inside of that Donbass territory then have to be attacked again.
Well, I don't know if this went viral today. I don't know if you guys saw it on CNN. Aaron Burnett had an interview with an American who's fighting in Ukraine, and was asking him, like, well, why are you fighting Russians? You're an American in Ukraine fighting Russians. And he's like, well, and basically his sentiment was, well, I don't want Russia to have the resources. So wait a minute.
The mines, you mean?
Well, yeah.
The natural resource mines.
Minerals. Land. Like, wait a minute, you're an American. So basically you're admitting that America and BlackRock and these others have basically bought up all of Ukraine. So you don't want Russia to have these resources. So an American is in Ukraine fighting Russians for resources. It's like Iraq all over again. We don't want them to have the oil.
It's a colonial thing to say, like, you should not benefit from the resources of the land you live on.
Yeah.
That's how the Congo lives. That's how much of Africa lives, because they're resource rich and monetarily poor. And so he wants this place to live like the Congo,
I guess,
so that other places benefit from resources of that land.
Let me see if I can play.
That's so colonial.
How crazy is it too to think that there are people that are passionate enough, they hate Russians enough, that they're willing to attack civilians, Russian civilians, the civilians that don't want to be part of Ukraine, yet they don't want to stand up to Russia.
Yeah.
Like, that's just.
Let me see if I can show you this interview. People are asking, can we play it here? And I didn't intend to do this, but I have it saved. If you see if we can play the audio here, Philip. See, well, this.
All you got to do, Clayton, you need to change your audio source to the HD 60s Plus.
Okay, just give me a second then. We'll come back to it in a second then.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, while he works that out, I'll show you a few more updates about the war, because Russia seems to be able to put down these counteroffensives pretty handily lately. If you take a look at this, Russian forces said that they today, they have eliminated troops and ammo in 3 areas where Ukraine has been attacking. They also destroyed 2 U.S.-made radars and intercepted HIMARS. Meanwhile, Ukraine is saying, wait, the counteroffensive, the main act hasn't started yet. Here, talking to the Financial Times, is Alexei Reznikov, Ukraine's defense minister, and he said this to the Financial Times: when it happens, you'll all see it. It's like you'll know it when you see it type thing. Everyone will see everything. It's like a snowball. The bigger it gets, the faster it rolls. So right now it's just a baby snowball, which I would say is really insulting to the people who died already in the first counteroffensive. Okay, then those people were the opening act, and now the main act is coming on stage later. So we just should wait for it. Those people, if your loved one had been lost and it was just like, oh, it's not it yet, how would you feel about that? Do you think you would want marijuana to cope, or would you want peace talks? Are you ready?
I think so. Are we ready to play this, David?
A dark, chilly, wet
ready.
night here in Dnipro. So you're just obviously off the front lines nearby as well, and you've shared some GoPro footage, sort of that when you're in the vest that you wear on your chest, that sort of shows your perspective as you're gathering intelligence to try to target Russian forces. I want to show some of the things that you've experienced that you're willing to share. This is a really intense confrontation that you had with Russian forces recently, just a few weeks ago in the counteroffensive. You came under fire and you had to retreat, and I just want to play that part so people can actually see a little bit, get a sense of what it's like in those moments. Just listen.
Sure.
Last year, a brief visit home for the birth of your son.
Yes.
You're putting your life in danger to help another country. And I think everybody wants to understand what drives you. What drives you to do it, Garrison?
Well, part of it is a lot of people aren't aware of this, but the Ukrainians sent soldiers to Afghanistan after 9/11. They were part of the forces that were there, and they were under no obligation to do so. And so to me, it's, they came to us in our time of need, and I see no reason not to go to them in their time of need as well. This is a very resource-dense area. I don't want Russia to get a hold of those resources and then leverage that to kind of destabilize the world and create more war.
Okay, did you know that Putin was one of the first people to call President Bush after 9/11 and actually opened up Russian bases to launch any counteroffensive on the Taliban?
Yeah.
So by that logic, you should be fighting for Russia because they also helped to respond to 9/11.
This guy's cool with the U.S. starting a bunch of wars, but just as long as Russia doesn't do it.
Well, they were in Afghanistan
but the resources, guys.
It's the resources.
Right.
So they were in Afghanistan killing random Afghanis for what reason exactly? Also, like you're justifying, well, they were there to help us fight for freedom in Afghanistan. And you could go back something earlier, David, that you said, which is like, well, why are we there? Like, why are we in Afghanistan? Why are we there why are we in Iraq? What are we doing? I'm here to make sure that you have oil because Saddam went into Kuwait. Like, that's what I'm going to give my son. So this big marketing campaign with tie yellow ribbons around the trees and, and we're standing for freedom. And then, now we're standing for freedom once again in Ukraine to a guy who literally just stopped elections. So you can't vote. So no more elections under martial law. Like, that's what we're standing for. Yeah. And their resources. We want to make sure that these resources don't get in the hands of Russians. We need these resources back in America.
Yeah, and I apologize. I meant Al-Qaeda, not the Taliban.
Okay.
You should not confuse those two, and I apologize for having done that.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.